It was around 3:30 in the morning when Shauna Tiafe got home after a long shift at work. The streets were quiet and everything seemed normal as she pulled into her garage. She walked inside, probably looking forward to some rest. But someone was already there, hiding in the dark. Moments later, something terrible happened. By the time the sun came up, her home was surrounded by police, and what the investigation uncovered left everyone shocked. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Born on March 13, 1966 in Salt Lake City, Utah, Shauna came into the world surrounded by snow-capped mountains and the traditions of a deeply rooted Mormon community. She was one of 7 siblings, and from a young age, Shauna stood out for her creativity, often losing herself in books or sketching delicate drawings of flowers. School was more than academics for her. With a vibrant spirit and magnetic charm, she became a cheerleader and was known for her wide circle of friends. During her adolescence, her family moved eastward, first to Pennsylvania, then to North Carolina, each move shaping her resilience and her dream of carving out a life that was entirely her own. That dream took form in 1994, when at 28 years old, Shauna made a bold leap. She left behind the familiar and moved west to Las Vegas, Nevada, a city pulsing with energy and endless reinvention. Las Vegas, the city of lights and luck, welcomed Shauna with its dazzling chaos. She began her new life working in a luxury department store where her natural grace and warmth shone through in customer interactions. Later, she transitioned into hospitality, first waiting tables at the Fiesta Hotel, and eventually landing a coveted position at the prestigious Palms Casino Resort. There, among the glamour and high-stakes clientele, Shauna thrived. Her colleagues became like family, and her work brought her both fulfillment and financial stability. Shauna had a glow about her, sun-blonde hair, an elegant sense of style, and a poised figure that commanded attention. But it wasn't her looks that made people gravitate toward her. It was her easy kindness, her lively laugh, and the way she genuinely connected with others. Friends described her as energetic, optimistic, and devoted, someone who found magic in everyday moments. In 2002, Shauna's world shifted again when she met George Tiafe. He was tall, athletic, and confident, the kind of man who left a strong first impression. His background was impressive: a former high school football standout and prom king, a graduate of West Point, and later a U.S. Army engineer turned firefighter. He had a magnetic presence and a compassionate heart, known for helping others, including financially supporting his mother, who was the primary caregiver for his disabled sister. Their connection was immediate and intense. Friends and relatives admired how naturally they fit together, two driven, charismatic individuals who seemed destined for each other. Their love story deepened when their daughter, Madison, was born. For Shauna, motherhood became her world. She doted on Madison, spending hours singing karaoke, laughing, and making memories that felt timeless. On March 16, 2006, Shauna and George sealed their love with a beachside wedding in Hawaii. The ceremony, framed by ocean waves and warm breezes, felt like a fairy tale ending. But behind the beauty, challenges were already beginning to brew. 2 years into their marriage, cracks started to show. The 2008 housing market crash hit George hard, and the financial blow sent shockwaves through their relationship. Shauna's love for spending clashed with George's urge to save. Disagreements, once minor, grew into frequent and intense arguments. George's frustration hardened into something darker. He became more possessive, critical, and cold. His cutting remarks stung even more when delivered in front of Madison. Adding fuel to the fire was George's growing bond with Noel Stevens, a homeless man he had brought into their orbit to help with yard work. George had always had a soft spot for the downtrodden, but Shauna never trusted Stevens. His constant presence unsettled her, deepening the emotional divide in the household. As the months passed, the tension between Shauna and George grew heavier, until the bond that had once held them together finally gave way. After nearly a decade together, Shauna made the difficult decision to leave the relationship, taking their daughter Madison with her. She moved to the quiet suburban community just outside Las Vegas, hoping that space and distance might offer clarity. Although she had stepped away, Shauna hadn't given up completely. Divorce was not yet on the table. Her heart still carried fragments of hope. Perhaps, with time and counseling, they could find a way back. Both she and George agreed to try marriage counseling. It was a last attempt to salvage what remained. But while the sessions brought moments of reflection, they couldn't erase the emotional divide. Shauna and George continued to live separately. The longer they did, the harder it became to imagine reconciliation. By September 2012, Shauna's optimism had waned. The future she once dreamed of felt farther away with each passing day. Then, something unexpected happened, something that would fracture any lingering sense of safety. One evening, Shauna returned home from work to find her house turned upside down. Someone had broken in. Her belongings were scattered, drawers rifled through, and key personal items had vanished. An engagement ring, underwear, a bikini, and a black dress. Even stranger, the intruder had left behind a small folded pair of boxers on the washing machine and had helped themselves to vodka from the fridge. It was a violation that shook Shauna to her core. This didn't feel like a random burglary. It felt personal. Though rattled, she tried to move forward, pouring her focus into work and caring for Madison. But the unease never fully left her. On the early morning of September 29, 2012, Shauna wrapped up her shift at the casino, clocking out at exactly 3:01 a.m. She walked through the casino's employee exit and into the Las Vegas night, slipping into her car for the familiar 30-minute drive back to her house. It was a drive she had made countless times before, but this one would be her last. Around 3:30 a.m., Shauna arrived home. She pulled into the garage and entered through the interior door. As she moved toward the staircase, she never saw the attacker waiting in the shadows. A sudden, brutal blow to the head with a hammer sent her crashing to the ground. The assault continued, relentless, silent. The attacker said nothing, even as Shauna begged for her life, sobbing, confused, desperate. "Why are you doing this?" she pleaded again and again. There was no response, just blow after blow. When her body finally went still, the killer fled, leaving through the same garage door Shauna had entered. He took the hammer with him. A few hours later, Just after 9 a.m., George completed his shift at the fire station. As he often did when Shauna worked late, he picked up Madison from his mother's house. Shauna and George shared custody, and Madison was set to spend a few days with her father. George headed to Shauna's home to collect some of Madison's things. But as he approached, something immediately felt wrong. The garage door was open. Shauna was always meticulous. She never left the garage open, not overnight. That detail alone sent a ripple of dread through George. As he stepped inside the house, his worst fears came to life. The interior was in chaos. Signs of a struggle were obvious. And then he saw her. Shauna was lying lifeless on the floor. Blood had soaked the surrounding area. George called 911, telling the dispatcher he had found his wife, and she wasn't moving. His voice was calm, too calm for some. But there were moments where his words faltered, his thoughts stalled. He also mentioned Madison, who was with him, and asked if he could take their daughter to his mother's house. When first responders arrived at the scene, they were met with horror. A woman was lying motionless on the floor, covered in blood, the house in disarray. The brutality of the attack stunned investigators. Shauna had suffered devastating injuries to her head, so severe that paramedics initially believed they were looking at a gunshot wound. But closer forensic inspection revealed a different truth. The blows had been delivered with a blunt object, relentless and violent. Her hands were torn and bruised, marked by defensive wounds. She had fought back. In her final moments, she showed unimaginable courage. Detectives first looked at George. It's a standard protocol in cases of domestic homicide. Those closest are questioned first. But George had a verified alibi. He'd been working a full 24-hour shift at the fire station, confirmed by colleagues and supervisors. With that path closed, investigators turned their focus elsewhere. The murder sent shockwaves through Shauna's circle of friends and co-workers. Many of them worked similar late shifts at the Palms Casino Resort. The randomness of the attack, its violence, the break-in from weeks earlier, left many feeling exposed and afraid. Some began to wonder, had someone been watching them too? Was this a random crime or something far more targeted? Detectives re-examined the earlier break-in at Shauna's home just 3 weeks prior. That event had left her rattled. Personal items had been stolen, underwear, a bikini, her engagement ring, while a strange pair of men's boxers had been left behind, folded carefully on the washing machine. It didn't seem like a typical burglary, and now that detail felt even more sinister. A break came when neighbors reported hearing loud, rhythmic thuds around 3:30 to 4 a.m. the morning of Shauna's murder. It lined up with her arrival time, suggesting she had been attacked within minutes of stepping inside. Soon after, another clue surfaced. Along a trail near the Willowbrook Apartments, about half a mile from her house, Shauna's personal belongings were found discarded. Her cell phone, health card, and makeup. It suggested the killer had fled on foot in that direction. Then came a name. William Big Will Penix was well known in the Las Vegas community, a handyman who also mentored recently released inmates. One of them, a man nicknamed Hart, had made a bone-chilling confession. In a disturbingly casual tone, Hart described how he had attacked a woman with a hammer. He even smiled while recounting how the hammer eventually broke from the force. At first, Big Will didn't know what to make of it. But when he saw the news coverage about Shauna's murder, something clicked. The details matched. He immediately contacted authorities. He told police that Hart often hung around a local Albertsons, scavenging and selling drugs. Across the street at a Chevron gas station, he was known to deal regularly. That was where officers found him. The arrest came quickly. Hart had narcotics in his possession. He gave his real name, Noel Stevens. It wasn't the first time his name had surfaced. Stevens had a history: petty theft, drug charges, squatting. But now, he was a murder suspect. During interrogation, he denied involvement in Shauna's death, but admitted he'd been living in a tent on a remote hill about 8 miles from the Strip. Police feared he might have hidden evidence there. They brought in helicopters to scan the area and searched his camp. They didn't have to look far. Inside the tent, investigators discovered a pair of pants stained with blood. Forensic testing confirmed what they feared. It was Shauna's. The walls of the case were closing in. Still, one question lingered. Why her? The answer emerged from digital records. Phone data revealed a shocking twist. Stevens had been in frequent contact with George. The man Shauna had once loved, the father of her child, had ties to her killer. Their relationship ran deeper, darker. George had hired Stevens for odd jobs around the house. But more than that, he had allegedly manipulated him, exploiting his vulnerabilities and desperation. And for just $600, George set a plan in motion to end his wife's life. From the beginning, Shauna's sister, Paula, had voiced her suspicions. Despite George's airtight alibi, she never believed he was innocent. She flew to Las Vegas to support the investigation, convinced that something more sinister had unfolded behind closed doors. That intuition proved chillingly accurate. Police searching Stevens' campsite found damning evidence: stolen clothing from Shauna's previous break-in and a vodka bottle bearing his DNA. The bottle matched the one used during the burglary weeks before her murder. Nearby, a cardboard packaging tag matched a hammer, one of the weapons used in the attack. Surveillance footage soon confirmed it. George and Stevens had been seen together at a hardware store. They were laughing, relaxed, buying a hammer, gloves, and a knife. What had once looked random now reeked of premeditation. Stevens, confronted with the mounting evidence, confessed. According to his statement, George had paid him $600 up front and promised thousands more after the job was done. For weeks, the two plotted the murder in detail. Phone records supported the confession: 87 calls between them in September 2012, 5 made just the night before the killing. Stevens said George provided keys to Shauna's house, even suggested dressing in black and breaking in ahead of time. On the night of September 29th, Stevens slipped into the house, hid in a closet, and waited. As Shauna walked up the stairs, he emerged from the shadows. Wearing a ski mask, he struck her with a hammer. When the handle broke, he used the steel head to finish the job. Then, he vanished into the night. Stevens later led investigators to the burial site where he had discarded the murder weapon, still marked with Shauna's blood. On October 8th, detectives visited George's family to inform them he was now a primary suspect. The news stunned his mother and sister, who refused to believe he could be capable of such a crime. But the pressure cracked George. After learning the police were closing in, he drove through Las Vegas at reckless speed, crashing his car into a concrete barrier. No skid marks, no sign of braking. Authorities believed it was a suicide attempt. He survived the crash, wearing his seatbelt, and at the hospital, George was placed under arrest. Both George and Noel Stevens were charged with murder. Stevens pleaded guilty and testified against George in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced to 42 years to life. George's trial began in August 2015. Stevens became the prosecution's key witness, despite his troubled background, history of drug use, and ongoing mental health issues. On the stand, he painted a picture of a manipulative friendship. George, according to Stevens, constantly vented about Shauna, angry about her spending, bitter about their crumbling marriage. When George first suggested getting rid of Shauna, Stevens laughed it off. But when the offer became $5,000, he said yes. In reality, Stevens only received the original $600. He later pawned Shauna's engagement ring, the same one stolen during the earlier break-in. He also revealed that George insisted on a hammer with a fiberglass handle, saying a wooden one might break. Surveillance confirmed the two buying the tools together. Ironically, the fiberglass hammer had been seized by police in an unrelated incident, forcing Stevens to use a wooden one, which did indeed snap mid-assault. At trial, the defense worked hard to dismantle Stevens' credibility. His past, his addictions, even his admission of hearing voices were all used to paint him as unreliable. They argued the tools were simply purchased for home repairs and nothing more. But it wasn't just Stevens' word that brought George down. The surveillance footage, the phone records, the discovery of Shauna's blood on Stevens' belongings, the matching timeline. One by one, the pieces formed a damning portrait of premeditated murder. The prosecution portrayed George as a man obsessed with control, unable to handle financial decline, an unraveling marriage, or the thought of losing power over Shauna. Witnesses described his once-admired discipline curdling into something dangerous. Despite character testimony from family members who insisted he was hard-working and principled, the evidence told another story. In 2015, George was convicted of first-degree murder. He received life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 32 to 81 years for related charges. He later appealed, blaming his actions on a cocktail of medications, including Adderall, estrogen blockers, and painkillers, prescribed after a workplace injury. In a handwritten confession, George claimed the drugs clouded his judgment. He also alleged that his defense attorney had failed him by ignoring his mental health struggles and not requesting a psychiatric evaluation. The appeal was denied. The conviction stood. In the aftermath, the greatest tragedy remained. Madison, Shauna's daughter, who had been exposed to the aftermath of her mother's murder. She now lives with Shauna's mother, far from the man who tried to destroy their lives. Out of this unimaginable loss, Shauna's family created something powerful: Justice for Shauna, a campaign to raise awareness about domestic abuse and manipulation. Her story is now a cautionary tale of love turned lethal, of trust weaponized, and of a justice system that, though imperfect, found its way to the truth. And behind it all, the memory of a woman who lived brightly, loved deeply, and deserved so much more. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.